Hi, I'm Heidi, and I am really excited to talk about Skinnfell, the history, and how it helps my farm work towards financial, ecological, and soil sustainability. So I'm going to use some time today to talk to you about what is Skinnfell, who am I, what is the history of Skinnfell, how it is a part of my farm, and where you can learn more. Skinnfell is the Nordic folk art tradition of taking tanned sheepskins, sewing them together, typically into big coverlets that were used for bedding, but they were used for other things as well, and then stamping designs on them with wood blocks. So who am I and why am I talking about this Nordic folk art? So my name is Heidi Eger. I run Radical Heart Farm. I'm a beginning farmer in 2025. This is my 7th season of running Radical Heart Farm. My goals as a farmer are to make sure that my sheep are as happy as possible, living their best possible lives. And then I work with the sheep to restore the ecosystem on all the different niches of ecosystem on the land that we steward. So we're working on oak savanna restoration, we're working on some erosion control, and then just working on soil health and improving the pasture. And then as we're doing all of that work, the lambs are producing incredibly delicious, incredibly nutrient-dense meat, and I sell that across Minnesota and in the Tri-States area. I am also, when I'm not farming, I am a Norwegian cooking instructor, so I teach lefse and kroomkake classes along with some lamb cooking classes, and I also teach Skinnfell classes. A little bit more background about who I am as a farmer. So I started farming in college. I started out as a vegetable farmer, and this photo of us in the car full of vegetables, that's from my first season trying to run my own farm with my sister who's in the back seat there. We tried to run a 1/2 acre market garden in a soil type that's called the Anoka sand plain. And you can tell by the name, sandy soil is incredibly hard to grow in because it doesn't hold on to nutrients or water very well. And so we were on some land that was hobby corn and soy farmed for about 20 years, and the nutrients were gone, and there was no soil life happening. And so it was this really struggle of a year, but it also gave my sister and I the chance to have this really real world, very applied soil health lesson. Like, we had heard that, you need to, soil health is important, and soil health is the bedrock to being able to successfully farm. And we thought we understood that. And then having this experience of struggling to grow anything on this 1/2 acre, even though we had imported, I don't remember, 5 tons of compost or something. It was a really great experience and a really challenging experience. And so I stepped back from that and thought, okay, I'm going to go and learn about animals, because this is a piece of property that, to be in a productive agriculture system, really needed to have animals incorporated into a rotation, or it should have been pasture for 5 years or something before we were trying to grow vegetables there. So I went and I learned about perennial fruit, I learned about sheep, I learned about chickens and ducks and geese, and I just totally fell in love with sheep. So I worked on 3 different farms that had different sheep management systems, and really fell in love with raising sheep on pasture, managing that pasture really carefully and intensively, and then letting ewes lamb and raise their own children, own lambs, on pasture. So that is what I am currently doing. Like I said, this is being recorded in 2025. This is my 7th year with my own sheep. I have a flock of Katahdins and Katahdin Texel cross lambs. So Katahdins, you can see in the picture that's the close-up of the ewe. Her coat looks really different. She maybe looks more like a goat. She has a really thin coat, and they actually shed every spring. So they get this big, thick, warm hair coat that keeps them warm and dry and comfy all winter, and then it sheds out in big clumps all spring. And that's really helpful because I don't have a building. And so in order to shear, you need to have your sheep dry, which means that to get an appointment with a shearer, you have to have a building to confirm that, yes, you can come and shear on this day, my sheep will be dry. It's also really expensive to have sheep shorn compared to the amount that you get back from selling the wool. The US wool market is not great, which is a huge bummer and a tangent I will not go down. So I am aiming to earn 3/4 of my income from my farm enterprises. And so right now my main enterprise is 100% grass-fed lamb and mutton that I sell direct to Eater. But it's really important to me that I can honor the lives of my animals, honor the sacrifice of the harvest by using as much of the animal as possible. And so that is how I got interested in Skinnfell. So, like I said, I sell 100% grass-fed lamb direct to Eater, and I'm selling whole lambs, half lambs, a first-time buyers kit, which is 4 different popular cuts, each with a like meal kit style picture-by-picture recipe. And then I also sell shepherd's boxes, which is the mutton from the older animals, from the ewes, and that is an 8-pound mix of ground and stew or one or the other. And then as I am trying to figure out like how can I use as much of the animals as possible, how can I honor that life and that harvest, I have been experimenting with different things. So I make pet treats out of any of the organs. If customers want their organs, they are welcome to have them. That's great. But if they don't, I will keep them and turn them into pet treats. I have made a couple of batches of soap. Right now I'm using lard, but the goal would be to use tallow from my sheep. I am offering some on-farm experiences for folks. So I'm trialing that just a little bit. Look on my website if you want more information. And then of course, the main topic of this conversation, of this presentation, is the Skinnfell, that Nordic folk art tradition. Okay, so that brings us back to what is Skinnfell. So a couple of caveats before I dive into the history. Everything that I was able to learn about the history of Skinnfell comes from a couple of books in the Vesterheim Museum's library. I used Google Translate. I don't speak Norwegian, and so I was using AI translate service to read those books. And furthermore, there are just a few people who collected information about this art form. And so all of this is sort of like being filtered through Google Translate. It's being filtered through these few people's experience and ability to collect stories right before this art form almost disappeared. So those are the caveats. That said, I am so grateful that the knowledge of this art form still exists because I think it's incredibly beautiful and just really fascinating. So a Danish woman named Lee Simon moved to Hallingdal, which is a region in Norway, in the 1950s. She was incredibly passionate about building restoration and other folk arts. And so in living in this community and working side by side with these folks, people started to tell her stories. And so most of the knowledge of this art form is from her. And then further research was completed by the Helgeland Museum. Also, second caveat, don't speak Norwegian. Apologies for my pronunciation errors. So printing blocks are really common in museums, but the skins are really rare because they were used and used and used until they were used up. So the picture behind me is, this is one of the Skinnfells that is owned by the Vesterheim Museum. It is the only one I've ever gotten to see in person. And there are a couple in museums in Norway, but mostly what they have to be able to track this art form is the blocks. So Skinnfell traditionally was used as warm bedding. That was the most common use. And references for using skins sewn together, there are references all the way back to the 900s in Icelandic sagas. And sheep were prevalent in the region all the way back to 3000 BC. They have records in archaeological sites in the Orkney Islands of sheep back that far. 44% of the bones in those archaeological trash middens are lamb, and so it was believed that, like, okay, by that point it was really domesticated lamb was a solid part of the farming life. So tanning skins is popular and common across the globe, but the printing we believe was unique to Norway. There is no other example that we know of printed sheepskins anywhere else in the world. But again, there's that caveat there of skins don't last super long, just like any other textile, they tend to rot away. And so there might be other traditions that were lost in other cultures. The use of printed sheepskins as bedding was really popular in Norway until 1900s, and it was all but gone in the 1950s. Hallingdal, the region that Lee Simon moved to, held on to that tradition the longest, partially because they were really holding on to their traditional wedding traditions, and it was very common for the new couple to be gifted one of these big pieces as a wedding gift. So that is like just the miracle of why we have this history and why we know about this folk art and why it continues today is just like the luck that this woman, Lee Simon, arrived in Hallingdal in 1950, was passionate about preservation of different cultural things, and then just attached. Like, this one spoke to her soul, and so she was really active in preserving this one. So to make those big, beautiful coverlets, they would use anywhere between 5 and 7 hides. And the really cool thing is that they would patch them together in really unique ways so that you could use absolutely as much hide as possible. Families would not harvest very many lambs and ewes per year, and so you wouldn't have a lot of new skins coming into your house. And then also just tanning is an intensely laborious process. And so every little piece was used and patched and reused and recycled, and it would last as your top bedding for around 4 to 5 years, and they would typically have 2. So you would have a bed coverlet that was made with fleece that had been shorn, so it was little shorter fibers for summer when nights were warmer, and then you would have your full-length long fleece for your winter bedding. So this is that picture from Vesterheim again, and it's really hard to see, but you can sort of see there are this one is made with 6 hides, and so there are seams north-south and then one running east-west. And you probably can't see it in the picture, but there are little areas where there's like diamond-shaped patches. So when you have a sheepskin, the armpit area doesn't have fur, doesn't have any wool, and so you can patch in pieces from the legs, which are more fluffy, into those armpits to get a bigger rectangle than you could if you just trimmed it off. And that was honestly one of the things that really intrigued me about this art form, was that intense level of care and respect and, necessity for using as much of the animal as possible. These were sewn with either waxed linen or waxed nettle thread. Today, people use linen or high-quality cotton. So again, the thing that really sets Nordic Skinnfell apart from the rest of the world, where bedding was used from, sheepskins were used to make bedding, is the decoration. So patterns were printed on with carved wooden blocks, and the inks would have either been made out of bark or leaves or other tree products, or from fruit or vegetable juice. And then the designs were unique to the traveling craftsman. So people in the early days, they were tanning in home, they would do the sewing in home probably. And then once a year, this craftsperson would travel through town and would stamp all of the finished hides. There were also regions where there were professional tanneries and professional sewers, and so it just really depended on like which part of the country you were in. Lee Simon has categorized all of the different designs into 5 main categories. So sun, water, animal, plants, and hearts. And there is some nuance that I didn't understand with Google Translate about hearts. Like, it's not about love, it's about like duality and male female and earth and ground and earth and sky, and like there's this really beautiful nuance that I could tell was beautiful, but I didn't understand, so I'm just gonna leave it at hearts. There's more there, but I don't know what it is. These are some photos out of Lee Simon's book, Skinnfell Boka. You can just see here the like vast variety of different categories and different techniques and different types of blocks, all the different variations on a theme, which is really cool. She said that in her, hold on, I'm going to talk about this on the next slide. So in Leigh's book, she talks about all the different blocks she looked at, all of the different hides she was able to see. And in her lifetime of work looking at all of these different things, she saw one pig, which is the picture here, one cat, a couple of dogs, but lots and lots of fish. There's really cool stories in her book of like when you were a fisherman, you would have one of these hides, one of these big pieces to keep you warm while you were out on the ocean, and you would store it in a barrel so it stayed dry. And then there are crazy stories of like a part of the ship was referred to as like barrels of hides, and if the ship got into trouble, each sailor would go and get their barrel and like use it as a floaty so that when they came to shore, they would have a dry, warm hide and they could survive until they were rescued. But like this tradition of having stamped sheepskins as bedding was so crucial and integral to their culture that it has parts of ships named after it. And then for that art form to be almost completely lost is just, it gives me chills. History is amazing. A lot of the designs in terms of diamonds and zigzags, the belief is that they were used as symbols of protection. And so there was parts of the country where it was really common to cover your decor with a tapestry, with a woven piece. So you would have the wool side would be against your skin, and then the skin would be up towards the ceiling, and it would be stamped, it would be decorated, it would be beautifully sewn, but then you would cover it up with a beautifully woven tapestry. And there's two views of that. It was either like, are people, do the tapestries get added later when the design is getting worn and you need to hide that is wearing out? Or is it more of like a protection? You're protecting that magic and those protective symbols. Nobody knows. Leigh told stories of finding lots of the blocks that were specifically animal designs would clearly have been transformed once they started to get a little bit too worn, or once this tradition fell out of favor, that those blocks would then be used as animals or as toys for children. So it's like every single piece of this would have multiple lives. So Spelsau sheep are considered the original Norwegian breed. They have a 5,000-year history in Norway. They have a really cool 2-layer coat. So they have an inner undercoat similar to like a husky, where there's this inner coat that's really dense, really warm, and then this outer coat that sheds water and dirt. And they would have been all different colors. So the one here is a whitish color, but they would have been many shades of gray, reddish brown, golden, and that hide that I showed you from Vesterheim way at the beginning, if you flip it and look at the skin side, it's like different colors of wool used in that hide, different, like they're not trying to match the colors of the hides because it is to keep you warm. That side is more utilitarian. English sheep were introduced in the 1800s, in 1836, and so the Spelsau sheep were almost lost. People transferred over to the English breeds because they grew faster, they produced more meat, and that was really important when you were a subsistence farmer. And so there was a breeding program developed for the Spelsau sheep, and their population is increasing, but it still is considered a breed of concern. Fascinatingly, in Norway, if you were someone who raised sheep, when people told Leigh Simon stories, the takeaway was that they would only eat 4 sheep every year. So you would have 2 spring lambs for your family, and then you would harvest 2 lambs in the fall for your family of 8 to 10 people. Your daily protein would have been grains, dairy, and fish. So lamb was crucial to their way of life and to survival, and not necessarily for the meat. The meat was definitely like a special occasion treat rather than a daily use. So you can see the 1800s was a big period of change. not only was the new sheep breeds being introduced, but also tanning was being sort of professionalized into its own industry. So before the 1800s, again, those skins would have been tanned in home. It's an incredibly complicated, incredibly difficult process. So it starts with harvesting the animal, and then you have to scrape all of the membranes and extra fat and things off of the skin side. And then you have to put it in some sort of fat or acid, let it soak, and then dry it. And while it's drying, you also have to stretch it to get it to be soft. So there were lots of different types of fats or acids, and the point of both of those is they're like getting in between the proteins in the skin and preventing water from interacting with those proteins. Water plus skin proteins means rot, and so you needed to prevent that. So brain is a source of fat and acid, urine, fish roe, pine and birch, bark, woods, and leaves, and then smoke would be used to sort of like seal the hide. I tried to get a better understanding of all the different processes and all the different chemistry in tanning, and all I can tell you is that it's really complicated, it's really impressive, and you should research it more if you want to learn more about it. Okay, so now you have this beautifully tanned hide, you've sewn it into a beautiful coverlet. How do you take care of it? Is this something that you're using every day? So every day or week it would get shaken out, and all of the like dust and everything would get shaken out of it, beat out of it. In the winter, if you wanted to do a deep clean, you can put it out. This is something you can still do with a wool rug or with your sheepskin, is you pick a cold, dry day when the snow is cold and dry and fluffy, and you put it out in the snow, and you can use the snow to sort of wash it, but without it getting a lot of moisture in it. You could, one of the things that they would get is bugs, lice, or bed bugs or other things. And so for that, you could just hang it in your building during a nice cold day and freeze those bugs to kill them. But if it was summer and you didn't have cold freezing temperatures, you could put it over a ant hill, and the ants would come and pick out all the bugs, and then also be laying down formic acid, which was considered to be a repellent for bugs, which I think is so cool. And then bonus fun, maybe, fact. There were stories that Lee shared of women who were having a hard time in labor and their labor wasn't progressing. And so they would be taken outside and put in the center of their sheepskin, and then there would be a person on each corner, and they would yank it like a trampoline and throw the lady up and down in the air to try and like readjust, get things going. Which sounds absolutely horrifying to me, that like you would be in labor, you would be struggling, and then all of a sudden you're being thrown in the air. But maybe it was a nice distraction? I don't know. So that's the overview of Skinnfell history. And then how does this beautiful folk art tie into farm sustainability for me? So I've already talked a little bit about honoring my animals is incredibly important. Using as much of the harvest as I can is incredibly important. And then besides the like soul feeding aspect of it, it also helps me meet my goals of ecological sustainability by taking something that would be part of the waste stream, the hides, and instead putting them into a beautiful use. And then it just feels really good to my soul to both craft with hides, to like the physical process of sewing hides makes me feel really good, and it's something that I really enjoy. And also just knowing that like these things that my animals are producing will have beautiful lives and be enjoyed by other people. You can see in this photo where they're drinking out of the water trough. So I have Katahdin moms, which is the breed that sheds. So they have a hair coat rather than a woolly coat. And then the lambs are a cross of those Katahdin moms and then a Texel ram. And Texel is a breed that is considered to have sort of a coarse quality, a carpet quality wool. And so the hides are beautiful and warm and luxurious, but not luxurious in the same way that like a Icelandic or Gotland hide would be. And so there isn't as much of a market for just the sheepskin hides as is, because they don't have those like beautiful long like curly locks. And so what that means is they are absolutely perfect for clothing. So for hats, for mittens, for muffs, for headbands, like all of those things where you just want to be warm and cozy, this is the perfect hide to use for that. And so I have been experimenting with doing decor items, so little sheep and ornaments, but also baby mittens and hats for adults, and like all of these things that are just glorious and warm and lovely. And so I love being able to connect to my heritage. My great-grandmother was from Trofors, from Norway. As far as I know, she didn't do anything with sheepskins, but it's still like, you know, part of my cultural heritage. So it's fun to be able to like connect to this woman that I never knew, connect to this heritage that like shows up a little bit in food traditions in my life. But other than that, like we don't have any cultural traditions other than a couple of food dishes. And so to be able to connect that heritage with what I'm doing currently, with the farming, with my goals for sustainability, with my love of crafting, it has been really a glorious path to travel. So if you are curious and you want to try to make some Skinnfell items, if you're in Minnesota, you're in luck, or anywhere near Minnesota. I teach classes at Norway House in Minneapolis and at Giants of the Earth in Spring Grove. And you can join my newsletter to find future classes on the farm. I'm hoping to do some like day-long come meet the sheep, let's craft days. And then my favorite teachers of this craft are Becky Utecht and Sue Flanders. You saw Becky in that first photo with that really beautiful big sheepskin. They are teaching at all of these places, and I think they have newsletters as well. Otherwise, like keep checking these places' websites to see them with future classes. I also sell little kits, so you can make some ornaments yourself, and you can find those or find out how to find them on my website. I'm incredibly grateful to Vesterheim Museum for allowing me access to their library and to these books. So these are the books that I used. If you are someone who can access books in Norway, Skinnfell by Lee Simon is available through their national library if you can get to it. So if you're in Norway or if you can VPN, I don't really understand how any of that works, but that is one that you could potentially read without coming to Vesterheim. Otherwise, Vesterheim does allow people with previous appointments to come in and read their books in their library. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about Skinnfell, this beautiful Nordic folk art tradition. I hope you will stay connected with me and my farm. I'm happy to give this presentation to groups. I'm happy to present via Zoom or in person. I'm also, you can join my farm newsletter. You can follow me on social media, Facebook and Instagram. You can join my newsletter, which I think I already said. I have lamb pre-orders open on my website, or you can get in touch. Thanks so much.